There exists a widespread belief that discipline is something you either possess or you do not, as if it were a fixed characteristic embedded in your personality from birth. People look at those who wake early, exercise consistently, and complete their work without procrastination, and they assume these individuals are simply made differently. They have more willpower, stronger character, better self-control. Meanwhile, those who struggle with consistency often internalize a narrative of personal failure, believing they are fundamentally flawed or weak. This entire framework, however, is built on a complete misunderstanding of how human beings actually function. The reality is far more interesting and far less moral. Discipline, as it is commonly understood, runs directly counter to the fundamental design of the human brain. This is not a metaphor or a motivational simplification. It is a concrete neurobiological fact. Your brain did not develop over millions of years to help you achieve abstract long-term goals or to prioritize delayed gratification. It developed for one singular purpose that overrode all others, which was immediate survival in hostile and resource-scarce environments. Every cognitive mechanism, every behavioral tendency, every impulse that feels natural to you is the result of ancestral pressures that had nothing to do with modern productivity or personal development. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors lived in conditions where the next meal was uncertain, where predators were real threats, and where energy conservation meant the difference between life and death. In this context, the brain adapted to prioritize quick rewards over distant possibilities. Eating food immediately was infinitely more valuable than any theoretical future benefit. Resting when possible preserved energy for genuine emergencies. Avoiding unnecessary exertion was not laziness, but intelligent resource management. The individuals whose brains were wired to seek immediate pleasure, avoid discomfort, and conserve energy were the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes. You are the descendant of these efficient, comfort-seeking survivors. This ancient programming still operates in you today, completely unchanged. When your alarm goes off at 5 in the morning and your body resists getting out of bed, that resistance is not a personal failing. It is your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is protect your energy reserves and prioritize comfort. When you sit down to work on a difficult project and find yourself suddenly compelled to check social media instead, that compulsion is not weakness. It is your brain seeking the quick dopamine hit that comes from novelty and immediate stimulation, rather than the uncertain and delayed reward of completing a challenging task. Your brain is functioning perfectly. It simply has not received the software update for the 21st century. The modern world, however, demands something entirely different from what evolution prepared you for. Success in contemporary society requires sustained focus, consistent effort toward distant goals, and the ability to resist immediate pleasures in favor of abstract future benefits. You are expected to be productive, disciplined, and reliable. You are supposed to delay gratification, maintain long-term projects, and demonstrate self-control across multiple domains of life simultaneously. This creates a fundamental conflict at the core of human experience. On one side, you have a brain shaped by millions of years to function like an efficient hunter-gatherer, always seeking the path of least resistance. On the other side, you have a world that demands you function like a tireless, focused machine. When someone attempts to force discipline through sheer willpower, they are essentially trying to override millions of years of evolutionary programming with nothing more than conscious intention and motivational self-talk. They are fighting against the deepest structures of their own neurology. And the outcome of this fight is predictable. It does not work, at least not sustainably. You might succeed for a few days or even weeks through sheer force of will, but eventually, the ancient programming reasserts itself. Fatigue sets in, motivation wanes, and you find yourself back where you started, often with an added layer of shame and self-criticism. This is where a fundamentally different understanding becomes necessary. The author James Clear, in his exploration of habit formation and behavior change, revealed something that contradicts almost everything popular culture teaches about discipline. Real discipline does not come from force, effort, or moral strength. It comes from intelligent design. The people who appear most disciplined, who seem to effortlessly maintain productive habits and resist temptation, are not necessarily stronger or more motivated than anyone else. What they have done, consciously or unconsciously, is create systems and environments that make the right behavior easy, automatic, and almost inevitable. They have stopped fighting against their brain and instead learned to work with it, to manipulate it, to design conditions where the desired behavior becomes the path of least resistance. This represents a complete inversion of the traditional understanding. Instead of trying to become a person with more willpower, the goal becomes creating an environment where less willpower is needed. Instead of attempting to strengthen your ability to resist temptation, you design your life so that temptations are simply not present when crucial decisions are made. Instead of forcing yourself to do difficult things through sheer determination, you make those difficult things slightly easier, slightly more attractive, and slightly more rewarding until they begin to happen naturally. What this means in practice is that when you fail to maintain discipline, when you procrastinate or give in to distraction or abandon your goals, the problem is almost never that you are weak or flawed. The problem is that you are using the wrong strategy entirely. You are trying to win a game that cannot be won through effort alone. You are bringing a motivational speech to a neurological gunfight. The brain does not respond to inspiration or shame or promises. It responds to structure, to environment, to carefully designed triggers and rewards. Once you understand this, everything changes. The question is no longer how do I force myself to be disciplined, but rather how do I create conditions where discipline becomes automatic. This shift in perspective removes the moral judgment from the equation entirely. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You do not lack character. You simply have not yet learned to design your life in a way that works with your brain instead of against it. The people who seem effortlessly disciplined have not transcended their biology. They have simply become better engineers of their own behavior. They have learned the principles that govern human action and applied them systematically. And now that you understand the fundamental mismatch between your ancient brain and your modern goals, you can begin to do the same. The path forward is not more willpower. It is smarter design. Once you grasp that your brain is fundamentally wired to seek ease and immediate reward, the next critical understanding emerges. The true battleground for behavior change is not inside your mind, but outside it, in the physical and social environment that surrounds you. Most people operate under the assumption that self-control is an internal resource, a kind of mental muscle that simply needs to be exercised and strengthened over time. But this model is dangerously incomplete. Self-control, as it turns out, is fragile and context-dependent. It crumbles rapidly when placed in an environment that constantly triggers the wrong behaviors. Consider what happens when someone decides to start exercising regularly. They feel motivated, energized, ready to transform their life. But when morning arrives, the workout clothes are buried in a drawer somewhere. The shoes are in the car. The gym is 15 minutes away. Meanwhile, the bed is warm, the phone is within reach, and social media is already loaded and waiting. The decision at that moment is not really between exercising and not exercising. It is between what is immediately available and effortless versus what requires multiple steps, mental effort, and physical discomfort. The brain, operating exactly as evolution designed it, chooses the path that requires less energy. This is not a moral failure. It is simply efficient decision-making by an organ that prioritizes conservation of resources. This is where the concept of choice architecture becomes essential. Human behavior is shaped far more by what is visible, accessible, and convenient than by what is theoretically desirable. If healthy choices are hidden, distant, or complicated. They will be avoided regardless of how much you claim to want them. If unhealthy choices are prominent, easy, and immediately rewarding, they will be selected almost automatically. The structure of your environment quietly dictates your actions thousands of times per day, usually without your conscious awareness. You are not making neutral decisions in a vacuum. You are responding to a carefully arranged set of cues and triggers that push you towards certain behaviors and away from others. Research demonstrates this principle clearly. In one study, simply changing the position of water bottles in a cafeteria, moving them from the back to the front, resulted in significantly increased water consumption and decreased soda consumption. No one was told what to do. No motivational posters were hung. No education campaign was launched. The only change was proximity and visibility. The easier option became the healthier option, and behavior followed automatically. This reveals something profound about human nature. You do not need to be convinced to do the right thing. You just need the right thing to be the easiest thing. Now imagine applying the same principle systematically to your own life. If you want to read more, the book should be on your pillow, not hidden on a shelf across the room. If you want to stop wasting time on your phone, the device should be in another room entirely, or at minimum buried in a drawer with notifications disabled and apps deleted. If you want to exercise in the morning, your workout clothes should be laid out the night before. Your shoes should be by the door, and your route should be predetermined. Each of these small adjustments reduces friction, making the desired behavior incrementally easier and the undesired behavior incrementally harder. This is what truly disciplined people understand, often intuitively. They are not relying on superior willpower or constant motivation. They are engineering their environment so that good behavior becomes the default option. They are removing obstacles, reducing decision points, and creating conditions where the right action requires less mental energy than the wrong one. Discipline, in this framework, is not about effort. It is about preparation. It is about setting traps for your future self, but traps that lead toward growth rather than stagnation. But environmental design is only part of the equation. Even in a perfectly optimized environment, you still need to initiate action, and initiation is often the highest barrier. This is where the strategy of habit stacking becomes invaluable. Your brain already operates dozens of automatic routines every single day. You brush your teeth after waking. You make coffee when you enter the kitchen. You check your phone when you sit on the couch. These behaviors require no conscious decision because they have been repeated so many times that they run on autopilot. The neural pathways are deeply grooved. Habit stacking works by hijacking these existing automatic behaviors and attaching new desired behaviors directly to them. Instead of trying to create a new habit from nothing, which requires enormous mental energy and willpower, you simply link the new behavior to something you already do without thinking. After you brush your teeth, you immediately do 2 minutes of stretching. After you pour your coffee, you write 1 sentence in a journal. After you close your laptop at the end of the workday, you put on your walking shoes. The existing habit serves as a reliable trigger for the new behavior. This works because the hardest part of any action is the beginning. Once you are in motion, continuing is relatively easy. Momentum carries you forward. But getting started requires overcoming inertia, and that is where most people fail. They wait for motivation to strike, and it never does. Habit stacking eliminates this problem entirely by removing the decision point. You do not choose whether to stretch. You just finish brushing your teeth, and stretching happens next because that is the sequence you have established. The action occurs before doubt has time to arise, before laziness can intervene, before rationalization can convince you to skip it. However, this strategy only succeeds if implemented correctly. The new behavior must be small enough that resistance is minimal. Aim for actions that take less than 2 minutes initially. It must be specific and clearly defined, not vague. And it must happen immediately after the existing habit, with no gap that allows distraction or delay. When these conditions are met, you create a mental track that gradually deepens with repetition until the new behavior becomes as automatic as the original trigger. What makes this approach so powerful is that these tiny stacked habits accumulate over time. A 2-minute stretch becomes 5 minutes, then 10. A single journal sentence becomes a paragraph, then a page. Each small action reinforces the larger identity you are building. And when you look back after weeks or months, you realize you have constructed an entire system of positive behaviors, all interconnected and self-reinforcing, none of which required heroic effort or constant motivation. Yet even with environmental design and habit stacking in place, many people still struggle. They know what they should do. They have removed obstacles. They have created triggers, but they still procrastinate. They still avoid the important work. And this is where a deeper understanding becomes necessary. Procrastination is not laziness or moral weakness. It is a symptom of poor design. When a task feels overwhelming, unclear, or unrewarding, the brain will naturally avoid it, regardless of how important you claim it is. The solution is not to try harder. The solution is to redesign the task itself according to principles that work with human psychology, rather than against it. The reason most habits fail is not mysterious. They fail because they violate one or more of the fundamental principles that govern human behavior. There are 4 laws that determine whether a behavior will become automatic or fade away, and understanding these laws transforms how you approach any change you want to make. The first law is to make it obvious. If a desired behavior is hidden from view or easily forgotten, it will not happen consistently. Your brain responds to what is visible and present. What you see is what you do. This means cues and reminders must be placed directly in your path, impossible to ignore or overlook. The second law is to make it attractive. A behavior that feels boring, unpleasant, or punishing will generate resistance, no matter how important it is. You can increase attractiveness by pairing the behavior with something you already enjoy, by reframing how you think about it, or by making the process itself more engaging. The third law is to make it easy. Every point of friction, every extra step, every moment of inconvenience increases the likelihood that you will abandon the behavior. Simplification is everything. The habit must be reduced to its smallest viable form, something so simple that refusal feels absurd. The fourth law is to make it satisfying. The brain needs immediate feedback that the behavior was worthwhile. Without a sense of completion or reward, there is no reinforcement, and the habit will not stick. This does not mean the reward must be elaborate. Even a small acknowledgement, a checkmark on a tracker, or a moment of conscious satisfaction can be enough to signal to your brain that this action is worth repeating. When all 4 of these laws are present, behavior change becomes almost effortless. When even one is missing, you create unnecessary resistance that willpower alone cannot overcome. Consider someone who wants to study every evening but consistently fails. Their current setup might look like this. The study materials are scattered in different locations, sometimes in a bag, sometimes on a shelf. The desk is cluttered with distractions. The phone is nearby with notifications enabled. The television is on in the background. They plan to study for an entire hour without breaks, and they have no system for tracking progress or acknowledging completion. In this scenario, failure is practically guaranteed. The behavior is not obvious because materials are not visible. It is not attractive because the environment is chaotic and uninviting. It is not easy because the commitment feels overwhelming. And it is not satisfying because there is no sense of progress or reward. Now imagine the same person applying the 4 laws deliberately. The study materials are already open on a clean desk before they sit down. A favorite drink and calming music are prepared to make the environment more pleasant. The initial goal is reduced to just 5 minutes of focused work, making it so easy that resistance melts away. And after completing even this small session, they mark it on a visible calendar and allow themselves a small reward, perhaps a single episode of a show they enjoy. The behavior itself has not changed, but the structure around it has been completely redesigned. Suddenly, what felt impossible becomes natural. This is the core insight that most people miss. They assume discipline is about forcing yourself to do things you do not want to do. But real discipline is about designing conditions where the things you need to do become the things you naturally do. It is about removing the need for constant willpower by making the correct path the easiest path. And when you understand this, procrastination stops being a personal failing and becomes a diagnostic tool. Every time you avoid a task, you can ask whether it is obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. If any element is missing, you have identified the problem and the solution simultaneously. But even with perfect systems and optimal environments, there remains a deeper challenge. Many people still resist because they simply do not enjoy the process. They do not like waking up early. They do not like exercising. They do not like studying or working on difficult projects. And they have been told repeatedly that you must love what you do, that passion is necessary for consistency, that you need to fall in love with the journey. This advice, while well-intentioned, is fundamentally misleading and often counterproductive. The truth is far simpler and more liberating. You do not need to like discipline to become disciplined. You only need to make it inevitable. The most consistent people in any field are not necessarily passionate about every aspect of their routine. They do not wake up every morning excited to do the hard work. What they have is a structure so solid that the right actions happen regardless of how they feel. They have removed feeling from the equation entirely. Motivation is irrelevant when the system is strong enough. Imagine someone who runs every morning. On most days, they do not want to run. Their body craves more sleep. Their mind generates excuses. But their shoes are by the bed. Their clothes are laid out. Their running partner is waiting outside. The playlist starts automatically. The route is predetermined. In this scenario, running has become the path of least resistance. The decision was made the night before, and the morning self simply executes the plan. The behavior happens before desire has time to interfere. This is the critical distinction. In a motivation-based approach, everything depends on your emotional state, your energy level, your momentary enthusiasm. When motivation fades, action stops. But in a systems-based approach, action is automatic. It is the default setting. It is what happens unless you actively choose otherwise. And choosing otherwise actually requires more effort than simply following through. This reversal changes everything. The final and deepest level of this transformation involves identity. No habit will truly last if it conflicts with how you see yourself. Every behavior is, in essence, a vote for the type of person you believe you are. When you exercise, even when you do not feel like it, you are casting a vote for the identity of someone who is disciplined and health conscious. When you read instead of scrolling through social media, you are voting for the identity of someone who values learning and growth. These individual votes may seem insignificant, but they accumulate. Over time, they build evidence for a new self-concept. This is why identity-based habits are more powerful than outcome-based habits. When you focus on becoming a certain type of person rather than achieving a certain result, behavior change becomes self-reinforcing. You are not just trying to lose weight. You are becoming someone who takes care of their body. You are not just trying to write a book. You are becoming a writer. The shift is subtle but profound. Identity change precedes and enables behavior change, and behavior change reinforces and deepens identity change. It is a cycle that builds momentum over time. Real discipline, then, is not the goal. It is the byproduct. It is what naturally emerges when systems are well designed, when environments are intentionally structured, and when identity is consciously shaped through consistent small actions. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be consistent enough to let the system work. You do not need infinite willpower. You only need enough structure that willpower becomes unnecessary. The people who seem effortlessly disciplined are not stronger than you. They have simply stopped fighting themselves and started designing for inevitability. And now that you understand how this works, you can do the same.